Welcome to the UFO Woman Show. I'm your host, Melissa Kennedy. And yes, we are still in the coronavirus quarantine. We're in week 2, and I am filming from my home and not in our regular WeBeam TV studios. But you know what? It's okay because the show must go on, and today's show is going to be a really good one. I have a lady that I kind of sort of know from growing up in West Virginia. She was in my neck of the woods, but she has been a major force in the UFO and contactee community. In fact, she's even coined the phrase exo consciousness. Her name is Rebecca Hardcastle Wright, and she's joining me from Phoenix. Hey, Rebecca, how are you?
Hello, Melissa. Thank you for inviting me. I love your set.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I mean, this, we got to make do at home, and this is my makeshift TV studio, if you will.
It's cool looking.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, my little alien mug here, he's always part of my set. And then I just had to fluff some other things in here and, try to make the best of what we have to work with. But, man, we are living in some crazy times right now, aren't we, Rebecca?
Yes.
It's really crazy. Here in Florida, it's really impacted us greatly, being, a major tourism state. It's really impacted us in a lot of different ways.
Right.
And in some ways, I have to say there's been some good outcomes because of it, because we are being forced to reconnect with humanity. And I think we're talking a lot more. I think we are maybe doing less of what we used to do and getting into some new good habits that hopefully will stay with us. After this whole pandemic is over with. I know I'm doing more hands-on type things, crafts and reading, and doing more exercise and things like that. So in some regards, I think there's some good things that come out of it. But certainly I am thrilled to have you on the show. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us. And got to touch on a little bit of our connection here with the West Virginia connection. You grew up in Clarksburg. I grew up in Bridgeport. And that's kind of cool. We're like 5 miles from each other.
Uh-huh. I used to go to, I think, was there an Italian restaurant in Bridgeport? I think we used to go there. And
Twin Oaks?
Maybe.
Was it Twin Oaks?
That sounds familiar. Yeah.
Well, there was Twin Oaks. There was, Oliverios. Of course, you guys had Menards, Spaghetti Inn, which was awesome.
Yeah.
We used to go there all the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, small world.
I love West Virginia. It's such
Small
a beautiful
world.
state.
Well, could you tell our audience a little bit about your background before we get into this list? I have a list of questions that I want to be sure that I ask you, but could you give our audience a little background about what you have done prior to the exo consciousness and all that? Just give us a little bit of background.
Well, I've been an experiencer since I was a child. I'm one of those early childhood experiencers. My first conscious memory was of around 3 years old. And I've had bedroom visitations. I've had going up on the craft. Since I grew up in West Virginia, and Clarksburg, it was rather small when I grew up there. And I was just allowed to run free. I was outside all the time. I was left the house in the morning and went out and played. And a very strange thing happened to me when I was probably like elementary school, or maybe even younger than that. I was playing outside and I went under the ground. I had one of those pulled under the ground experiences that people in Ireland and Scotland and England talk a lot about. And later on in my life, I figured out I had kind of a shamanic experience, but I had West Virginia is full of coal mines, so it's very porous land, as well as culturally amenable to that kind of experience. And but I had a very sensory experience of being pulled under the ground and then being popped up out of the ground, and that happened more than once. And I was also had craft connections, UFO craft connections, being on the craft as a sensory experience, beings in my bedroom. And then I moved from Dayton, and I actually lived in Buchanan for a while, for 2 years.
Oh,
I have
okay.
dear friends,
Okay.
dear friends that live in Buchanan, and I lived there for a few years, and then we moved to Dayton, Ohio. And interestingly enough, my father, I told you, was a United Methodist minister, but before that, he was Evangelical United Brethren, and we got to Dayton, and he became the pastor of a German-speaking church in Dayton, and there were lots of engineers in Dayton. It was heavily populated by engineers because of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and the Manhattan Project, parts of the Manhattan Project were there. There were just a lot of inventors. It was a little kind of Silicon Valley vortex, at pre-Silicon Valley vortex, I guess I would say, but heavily into engineering and science. And I often wonder as a child, were there people in our congregation that were part of Project Paperclip? I don't know.
Oh gosh, boy, that's interesting.
Yeah, but there were many,
wow.
Many scientists there, many engineers. I mean, the biggest club in town was 2 clubs. The bicycle club, because Huffy Bicycle was there, of course, the Wright brothers and the bicycle shop. And then the second club was the engineers club. So
okay. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you were right there in the thick of all the activity.
Yeah, very.
I mean, as a kid, you probably didn't really realize maybe all of that, but my goodness, you were in the hotbed section.
One of the things I ask people to do, I do a lot of coaching, and I'm a therapist. One of the things I ask people to do is to actually write their extraterrestrial autobiography, and especially where they lived, who they were around, who they came in contact with, sort of what the ley lines were, you could say, of the geographic places that they moved in their lives. So. It's a very interesting thing. And from Dayton, I was in Dayton quite a while. I actually worked in Dayton at Wright-Patterson at Wright State University, which was right next door to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. They were neighbors. The land abutted. I was a university chaplain there for many years. So
wow,
I knew many people.
That's interesting. Well, do you recall seeing any unusual activity when you were around the base, or?
Well, a funny thing about that is, I had all this extraterrestrial experience throughout my life, ongoing. I still have it today. And in 1997, I lived in Phoenix, and
what year were you there?
In 97. I moved to Phoenix in 92, so I was here in 97. And I was at that time a member of a group run by Dr. Ruth Hover. She worked with John Mack and the peer group, John Mack, Leo Sprinkle. She became my mentor. That was another happenstance in my extraterrestrial autobiography. And so I'm there. I've got lots of friends. So the Phoenix Lights happen on March 13th, 1997.
Yes, I was there. I lived in Phoenix at that time. Yeah. I was a teacher at the Gila Bend Indian Reservation.
Oh, okay. Well, you probably saw it. I didn't. I did see it.
I did see it.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes. Dr. Lynn Katai and I have had hour-long conversations about this.
Yeah, she's a dear friend of mine. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Small world, Rebecca.
Right. So I didn't see it. And I had no idea it happened. And at first I was like, what the heck? What's going on here? This is very strange. And then I realized something, because most of my friends who saw the craft all became craft researchers and became very involved in UFOs and researching different aspects of ufology. And I didn't. At that point, I'm very dedicated. I had been even before that, but I knew that my role was to be involved in consciousness, that I was to work in the consciousness aspect of ufology, and thus exoconsciousness was the result of that. I can tell your listeners real quick how that happened.
Yeah, please.
So it was in the early 2000s, so right after the Phoenix Lights, a few years after the Phoenix Lights. I'm a single mom, and I have 3 kids at home at that time. And I'm getting up, and I'm very busy. I'm working. I'm a single mom. I'm studying. I'm learning about who I am and what's really happened to me. I'm very curious as to what my childhood all means at this point. And so, remember those phone alarm clocks that would go off?
Yes.
And they had like the little button that you hit, like the snooze button.
Yeah.
So I'm hitting the snooze button because I'm thinking, oh my golly, I need like 5 minutes because I got to get up. Everybody's got to get to school. I've got to get everything ready for work, get the kids to school. I hit the snooze button. I fall back down on the pillow in my bed, and this word, exoconsciousness, comes into my body. It came in my body. It didn't just come in my ears. It wasn't a telepathic experience per se, because I have those frequently, but it definitely was a full physical incarnation of that word that came in my body at that time. And from then on, I started working with it. Michael Salla was working with the Exopolitics Institute at that time, and he was trying to engender a lot of interest around academics. And since I've been an academic, I'm like, well, okay, I'll write an academic article. And so really the first iterations of exoconsciousness were really more along an academic lines. So my first definition was exoconsciousness is the study of the extraterrestrial origins, dimensions, and abilities of human consciousness. And I approached it like that.
So like interrelated then, where
just looking at all
I
the
just
sources.
I want to be sure that our audience understands. I understand what you're meaning, but I want to be sure that everyone watching, if you're new to this word or new to this concept, you're saying that the intergalactics or interdimensionals, they are, how would you describe it with the human race? They would intertwine.
We as humans
download.
have an extraterrestrial origin.
Mm-hmm.
So right. Looking into the extraterrestrial seeding of the human race. We have dimensions. We have extraterrestrial dimensions to us. That means could be multidimensional mind, could be multidimensional consciousness. I wrote a lot about, and I still do today, about how brain is not our consciousness. Brain's part of our consciousness, but our consciousness is beyond our brain. So the origins, dimensions, and then abilities. We all have psychic abilities that stem and are in line with extraterrestrials. So
right.
Today,
so, I mean, I know just in my own studies, whether it's ufology, universal consciousness, I mean, I've been into metaphysical stuff for 25, 30 years. So, I mean, I love this kind of stuff, obviously. I just want to be sure that, if you're watching the show and this is all new concepts to you, I mean, what we're saying here is that the human race is intertwined, if you want to think of it that way, interrelated. It's an extension of who we are. I mean, what we're talking about here goes far beyond any textbook that we've ever read in traditional schooling. This is a big, big concept. I mean, this is something that if you're new to it, it could just take your mind and just blow it out of proportions for a little bit until you understand what it is we're talking about. We've had lots of topics here on the show about universal consciousness and, just little things like, I mean, just a simple thing as a thought that goes out into the universe can have an effect on a lot of things. I know Saturday we had the 1 million person meditation that I participated in with a really good friend of mine and others, participated. That was big. I mean, April 4th, that huge meditation that took place. I mean, imagine the impact that we must have had on the universe coming together consciously, trying to better our planet, trying to end this coronavirus and do something good. So could you talk to that point a little bit too, Rebecca? I mean, how what we think can also affect the consciousness, the exo-consciousness, if you will?
Well, our thoughts are, I think thoughts are very complex. I don't think a thought is as easy as, I'm going to put a neural implant in your brain and tell you what to think, or that, humans are just we already know. Some transhumanists say, oh, we already know 93% of how humans are going to behave and what they are and what they think. I just don't. I'm sorry. Humans are a lot more creative than that. Really, what we're talking about, in a sense, is what's been called cosmic consciousness, and it's part of religion. It's part of mythology. It's certainly part of science now, going out into the cosmos. I worked for a time with the astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell, and he was working on the quantum hologram at that point, and he was really talking about cosmic consciousness, and he was trying to find a way to talk to scientists about cosmic consciousness. And so what he did was come up with this hologram theory of consciousness, where there's information out in space around us, in the cosmos, as far out as into the cosmos, and that we can interact with that information and we can bring it into our bodies. And for us with exoconsciousness, we believe that we receive this information, that we go out and solicit it actively, and that we translate it into what we need with it. So the second part of exoconsciousness for us, the next iteration of a definition, was that exoconsciousness is an innate human ability to have contact, communication, and most importantly, co-create with extraterrestrials and multidimensionals. So we believe every human has this ability. It's their choice whether or not they want to use it and develop it, or if they just want to ignore it, that's fine too. Everybody has a freedom of choice what they want to do with cosmic consciousness, but we believe that it's there, and that part of the development of humans is that we begin to understand this cosmic aspect of who we are. And what better way to understand the cosmic aspect of who we are than by making something? So the emphasis of the Institute is what we're co-creating with extraterrestrials and multidimensionals, a exoconscious civilization. So we are doers. For example, if you want to know what a computer is, what better way to find out what a computer is than to make one?
Right. That's actually a very good analogy, which then has to take me to that next step, and that is, how does artificial intelligence play into this? Because I just rewatched The Matrix. Yesterday, I binge watched all the Matrix movies, and I'm like, really think we should be rethinking this whole artificial intelligence idea. I don't know. There's good and bad. I mean, it could go either way with it. So what's your take on that in regards to exoconsciousness?
Well, I'm certainly not a Luddite. I'm not going to say, I'm going to go live in the forest and never use the computer and never use artificial intelligence. I'm not going to say that, but I'm actually just finishing up a book called The Exoconscious Human, claiming our psychic intelligence in a transhuman world. So what I'm doing, Melissa, is examining all those issues of transhumanism, and I'm making a comparative study of what an exoconscious human or an exoconscious civilization would look like compared to what a transhuman civilization or a transhuman individual would look like. And there's startling differences. It actually has taken me a long time to write this book because emotionally, it really triggered me. Things I was researching, things I was finding out. It was very emotionally triggering. So I took my time with it, and I'm just wrapping up on my second draft of it. But there's so many ways that we're different, but there's also in the book, so I do the distinctions, but in the book I also do the commonalities, and I also talk about fields of common interest that we can have with transhumanists, and how we can work together on this planet. But there definitely are distinctions. I would go as far as to say, after all of my research, that if we would move into a complete transhuman civilization, which I don't think is going to happen, or I don't think is possible for a number of reasons that we can go into. But if we would, that would be the issue of the survivability of human consciousness at that point.
Okay, so what's your take then? Why do you think that that's not a possibility? I'm just curious because you've studied this, you've researched this extensively. I've had the department head of artificial intelligence for IBM on my show, and the whole entire topic of conversation was how AI is going to basically take over in less than 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
So just curious, what's your take on that? Like, where do you see the transhuman versus the exoconscious human?
In terms of the transhuman takeover?
Yeah.
I have a couple reasons for thinking that. And I did think that for a long time. I'll be honest with you. I thought about that quite a bit. But working for Edgar Mitchell, I was moved to Washington, D.C. to work with Dr. Mitchell. And when you're in D.C., you always run into people that are involved in DARPA or, high level work. And I had more than one meeting with a person. I'll just give you an example. I had a conversation with a woman that worked for DARPA. It was I met a lot of these people actually when I would go to yoga class. They come in yoga class and I like strike up a conversation with them because everybody's relaxed after yoga. They kind of would open up and talk to me. So we're walking outside in the parking lot. I'll never forget this day. And she told me she had worked with AI consciousness projects in DARPA, and she'd been there for 20 years. I said, wow, that's really impressive. How's that? And I told her my background, and I was interested in consciousness as a researcher, and what I was doing with Dr. Mitchell, and kind of put some credibility there. And I said, well, how's it going for you in your work with consciousness and AI? And she goes, we're stuck. I said, really? She goes, oh yeah, we're stuck. She said, we have a fundamental issue with consciousness, and you probably will never hear that publicly. And I said, oh, what's your issue? Is it because it's not in the brain? It's beyond the brain? And she goes, yeah, precisely.
Oh, that's interesting.
So
and kind of a good thing in a way, because that's a fundamental element that we humans have that no machine has as of now, at least that we know of. But I don't know, that could change. That could change pretty quickly.
Well, sure, it's going to change
possibly,
because if that all depends on the path you choose to live your life. That's why we're doing this exo-consciousness, is because we feel like we need to be offering people an option, and giving people information of you can go down the transhuman path with blinders on and not even know that it happened to you.
Right. That's for sure. That is for sure. And that's part of the mission here with the UFO Woman show. Is as an educator, I used to be a school teacher for years, and I feel like I'm still continuing, my path as a teacher, just in a different way. But I'm all about getting information out there, and be your own judge, because some of this is not for everybody, and some of it might open someone's eyes to thinking differently and to researching these topics that we're talking about. So you talk about the Institute. It's a nonprofit, correct? Mm-hmm. It's a nonprofit organization. What are some of the missions that you guys have there at the Institute? What's some of the services? What's some of the missions that you have?
Well, our primary mission is to support and advance all types of innovations and inventions that are co-created by humans and ETs and multidimensionals. So we are supporting innovations in education, health. There's a lot of healers in our community, a lot of educators like yourself. Technology, a lot of technologies are coming out of this community. Science, communication, different communication techniques. So we're fostering that. We're helping to scale that into the mainstream culture. But these are co-created inventions. So we're not looking for someone that's just had an invention. We're looking for someone who is actually an experiencer of ETs and multidimensionals and wants to bring forth their work. So, and that all of that work is what builds the exoconscious civilization.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, when did you start the Institute?
The Institute's been in my mind for a long time, but always in the back of my mind. But after working with Dr. Mitchell in Washington, D.C., there's lots of good stories around that too, of course, because we were working with
I bet. I want to hear some of them.
we were working with 0 point energy and the extraterrestrial presence and consciousness. So I got to work with a lot of scientists and just was on a steep learning curve there. But when he became ill and passed away, I just was sitting there in DC thinking, what am I going to do? And did you ever meet Cynthia Crawford?
No, I haven't. I know who you're talking about. No, unfortunately, I haven't met her.
So Cynthia was one of the people. She called me up one afternoon and she's like, Rebecca, what are you doing? And I said, just kind of trying to find out my next step. And she goes, oh, you have to start a group. You need to start a group. And I'm like, okay, I think so too. And so I was, how you put those signatures on your email?
Yeah.
So I'm like figuring out my signature and I'm emailing back or texting back and forth with messaging back and forth with a friend of mine here in Phoenix. And she goes, oh, here's your signature. And she sends me this thing and says, Rebecca Hardcastle Wright, founder, Institute for Exoconsciousness. And I had never said to her I wanted to do that. And so
my gosh,
everything was kind of coming at me fast and furious. So what I did was really quite simple. I had a lot of colleagues all across the world. And so I just set up a mastermind. I sent them all an email and I said, hey, you want to have a mastermind and talk about who we are as experiencers, but what we could do with it together as a group. And we gathered and talked about it. And in the meantime, then my husband and I moved back to Phoenix and I established the Institute here in Phoenix.
Wow.
And now we have a board of directors and it's all official. And we're actually putting out, your listeners might be interested. We put out a newsletter every month or two.
Okay. And they can sign up for it on the website?
Sure. You can sign up on that website, the exoconsciousness.com, or just email me, rhardcastlewright@gmail.com.
Okay. And what does the newsletter, what do you normally put in your newsletter?
So what we're doing this month is we always have exoconscious entrepreneurs that we feature, like what they're doing. This is a first step. And then we feature educators or people with inventions or artists. We have a lot of artists that are in our community. And then we do conferences, feature different conferences that people are hosting and just the work in general they're doing. But this month, I'm going to be sending it out this week. We had a board meeting, and during our board meeting, we discussed, every board member went around and spoke about what's happening with this pandemic with coronavirus and how that's affecting us as humans and as exoconscious. And did they have any messages from their ETs and multidimensionals? So that's going to be the first link on the website, is a 30-minute discussion where everybody in the Institute got to give their messages that they'd received about what this all meant.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. Yeah. I mean, I tell you, this whole coronavirus, I mean, this exact weekend, actually, I was supposed to have UFO Con. And, we were going to have it at the Orlando International Airport. I had Nick Pope. I had Stephen Bassett. I had David Hatcher Childress coming, William Henry, Dave Spinks. I mean, I had an unbelievable lineup, but obviously I had to cancel it. Which is sad. Sorry. Because I've worked really hard for the last 3 or 4 months, putting this together and making this convention happen. And then of course this happened and we've had to cancel it.
Those are great people.
Unfortunately. So it's impacted everybody. It's sad, but I think your newsletter sounds really interesting. I know I'm going to sign up. That's for sure.
I'll sign you up, Melissa.
Okay. It's good to be friends. It's one of the perks. Well, your institute sounds just fascinating. I mean, it's more than just, your normal nonprofit. I mean, you're really getting out there and getting information, education, a place for contactees to go to. It sounds like you have a really great board of directors.
Oh, they're amazing. I mean, we have people from Brazil. it's interesting. The man I work with in Brazil, Juliano Pazzotti, he had the same experience getting the word exoconsciousness that I did.
Oh,
It
wow.
came into his body one morning when he woke up. And so he wrote, Brazilians do a lot of these kind of small study books. And so he wrote a small study book on it. And then he said, oh, I thought I'd go out on the internet and find out if there's anybody else that's doing this work. And that's how he found me. And he wrote to me, it's like, you have to come to Brazil. You have to come meet us. We have to work together. So we've been working together ever since. Brazil has an amazing healing community, spirituality community, study community. We in America, I have to say, we in the U.S. do a lot of talking, and Brazilians do things. They have a very different culture, very different needs as a country.
Right.
That's
their whole mindset in Brazil, even their government mindset's different. I mean, they actually want their citizens to come out and help find information about UFOs. Here, we just cover it up and tell everybody that, oh, that's not what it was. It's a weather balloon. It's a whole different mindset in Brazil. I'm like, I want to move to Brazil. It's such a different mindset. People. And you're right. Yeah. They don't just talk. They actually do. Mm-hmm. And they put the power oftentimes in their citizens to help solve the mysteries of the UFO cases and whatnot. And they have a slew of activity there. Oh my gosh, I've seen so many UFO reports from Brazil. It's crazy.
Yeah, they're healing centers. I've met so many. I mean, one of my colleagues there, she was a physician that ran a big hospital in Sao Paulo. And as a physician, she was like head of physicians, but she also, on her quote time down and on the weekends, she and her partner ran this amazing healing clinic in Sao Paulo for people that couldn't afford. So people would come and they would bring themselves and their pets, and they would come and heal. So I'm in this healing clinic, and it's sort of church pews where people would sit and wait to be treated, and then they're taken then eventually to a back room. And they took me in the back room, and in the back room were three practitioners. One was healing with aquatic beings. One was healing. She was a shaman from the Amazon. And then one was healing, I believe, with a mantis being. And they had some of the people hooked up to, electrodes so they could monitor and do a scientific research as to what was happening in their body as they were doing this healing. So then they transfer from that healing into a large Reiki room where there's probably, 20 or 30 Reiki beds. And then you receive a Reiki treatment.
Yeah, I do Reiki, and that's fascinating. Oh my gosh! So they're really involved in the metaphysical, the consciousness, UFOs, intergalactics. I mean, their culture is different. I mean, you touched on that. Their culture is completely different than ours here in America. They're much more open.
We also have healers here in like Sheila Seppi, Spirit Way Wellness in Eagle Vale, Colorado. She's on our board. She's doing remarkable cosmic inventions, using remarkable cosmic inventions of healing that she's working with. Maya Christabel in Maine. Darlene Vandergriff is in New York State. She works with Council of 28. And that Council of 28, she receives a lot of messages from. So that will be included in the newsletter, on the audio from the newsletter. Rodolfo de Oliveira is Brazilian, but he lives in Portland, Oregon, and he does a lot of spirituality. He's really led me to understand more deeply, speaking about an exoconscious human as a sovereign, morally autonomous individual. And so I work a lot with Rodolfo around moral autonomy and what that means to be morally autonomous. See who I'm forgetting. Nicole Richmond. She's a member of the First Nation. She's an attorney in Canada, a member of the First Nation in Canada. So she does a lot of healing work and social activism for the Native American community.
Nice, nice. Oh, that sounds fantastic. Well, your board is just stellar. I mean, my goodness, you have an incredible board. That's awesome. Well, you mentioned the Council of 28. So explain to our audience exactly what that is, because I'm sure there's some people out there that don't know what we're talking about, the Council of 28.
Well, throughout extraterrestrial literature, actually throughout religious literature, Jesus had 12 disciples, there's always been this idea that, when you go into a religious experience or when you go into cosmic consciousness, that you encounter groups of beings, not just a being, but you could encounter a being, but it's often times you encounter groups of beings. So there's certainly been talk about, I wrote in my book, Exoconsciousness, Your 21st Century Mind, I wrote about the early groups that I worked with. Council of 9, a Council of 12. Darlene Vandergriff works with a Council of 28. What she does, and she'd be a great guest to explain herself what she does. But the way I understand it is, her council works with healing timelines. So she actually works with extraterrestrial races that want to heal their timelines and maybe becoming morally autonomous as extraterrestrial races. And that's the kind of work she does for humans and for extraterrestrials. Is this timeline healing is one of the things that she does. But she also has been working with the State University of New York on an astrosociology course. So there are astrosociology courses in America that are looking at these topics.
Wow. Well, I wonder if any of them are online, because that'd be a nice thing to do to pass our time right now as we're in quarantine. I'm on the website, different websites looking for classes that I could take right now in the different, areas that I'm interested in. That sounds really cool. Well, I'm looking down through my list of questions, and there's one topic that we haven't touched on yet, and we've got about 15 to 20 minutes left here, Rebecca. And one of the things I want to talk about for sure is CE6. And I know what CE5s, I've participated in numerous CE5s, and that's when a group gets together and we actually initiate the contact with the intergalactics ourselves. But explain to our audience what the CE6 is. We've talked about CE5s on the show before, so I think most of the people know what we're talking about there. But CE6, what exactly is that?
Well, let's back up even before CE5, and Alan Hynek was the researcher, the scientist that came up with the close encounter classifications to explain what was happening. He did CE1, CE2, CE3 in terms of seeing a UFO craft. And then Jacques Vallée did CE4. So for Jacques Vallée, CE4, he was talking more about reality. He looked more into abduction experiences. I suppose many of your audience and you are familiar with Passport to Manjonio, where he went into the different folk tales of meeting extraterrestrial type individuals, or folk tales that mirrored and had a great similarity to ET contact. So he called that CE4. A CE4 experience. He went into hallucinogenics, abduction, that's folk tales, that sort of thing. And then Stephen Greer, CE5, where there's mutual voluntary contact, as you say. Sometimes you can call in the craft, sometimes but it's a mutually respectful, mutually voluntary kind of contact that happens in CE5. CE5, though, is primarily an outwardly focused contact. So you're going out in the fields, you're looking up in the skies, you're looking for craft, you're looking through contact in an outward manner. CE6, we call the exoconscious human, and the exoconscious human really means human. It means that it's a contact focused upon the human, where the transformation that takes place within the human, and it's the analysis of how our definition of self changes, how our physical body changes, how our consciousness abilities change, our psychic abilities heighten, and we can begin to use our psychic abilities. So that's the distinction of CE6. I came upon it when I was Ray Hernandez and Free asked me to write a chapter for his book, Beyond UFOs. And he asked me to do an exoconscious analysis of his data. So he sent me all of his data. And honestly, Melissa, I just spent probably 3 days just sitting with the data. I didn't really think about what's this data mean or what am I going to write my chapter about. I just sat there and read the data. I wanted the experiencers to speak to me. I wanted to really be a listener and hear them. I'm a therapist, so I'm a big listener.
Yeah, right. Well, my good friend and also author Kevin Briggs is in that book as well, and he talks about his remote viewing and all of his experiences, which is just incredible. I mean, Kevin and I get together and talk quite often, and he's explained a little bit about what you're talking about. But it's just, it seems like all of the guests that I have on here, it's all kind of interrelated. All of this stuff is interrelated, and it's just different facets of the whole picture. And what you're talking about with the CE6, I mean, it's another extension
it's
of
an expression, and it's focusing on the humans, and it's time to focus on the humans because much of ufology and much of extraterrestrial research has always been focused on the ETs.
Right, and the crafts. Yeah, you're right. And there's just so much more to that. That's kind of like surface stuff that I would consider like on the surface type of stuff. But what we're doing here, and Rebecca, you're doing a fantastic job, is you're diving way, way beyond the surface, and you're taking this to a whole nother level through your institute, through your books. And you've written how many books? I kind of lost count because you have so many.
Just a few. Just a few.
You're being modest. You have quite a few. And I look forward to reading those here soon because I'm running out of reading material. I've kind of gone through my UFO library. I've gone back and reread a few.
I was going to tell you a great Kevin Briggs story. This is how I met Kevin
please
Briggs.
Share.
Because Kevin, he's been on your show, so your listeners will like this. So I've been working with Dr. Mitchell in Washington, D.C., and I had set up meetings with John Podesta at the White House because Edgar Mitchell and I wanted to go meet with Barack Obama. That was really the focus of what we were doing. Wanted to talk with Barack Obama about zero-point energy, disclosure, extraterrestrial presence, consciousness. Okay, so I suggested, well, why don't we just reach out to Podesta because he was White House counsel at that point, and I knew that he was very, very interested in these topics. And so I started emailing John Podesta to set up a meeting with Barack Obama. And so John Podesta agreed to the meeting. He said, I will meet you first. And what he was being a gatekeeper, he was saying, I'll meet you first, and then we'll see if you can go meet President Obama. And so I had the meeting set up for the week of August 11th, I believe it was, 2014. And Dr. Mitchell had started to become ill and had to cancel and couldn't come to the meeting. That was a really hard thing for me. So I had kind of let that go, and we worked a little bit after that, but his health was such that we wasn't really possible to work together as much anymore. So I let that go, and then in 2016, I wake up one morning, so this friend calls me on the phone and says, get out of bed, turn on your computer. All of your Podesta emails are in WikiLeaks. So
my gosh. So you were on WikiLeaks. Wow.
Yeah, so all of my emails to John Podesta were on WikiLeaks. They were written on behalf of Dr. Edgar Mitchell and myself, but they were all on WikiLeaks. And so kind of went through that period. And then I began to have the first beginnings of starting the Institute. And so Kathleen Martin, Kathleen, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's so sweet. Yes.
So she writes me this email and she goes, there's a man that has a message for you from Dr. Mitchell. And can he send it to you? And I'm like, yeah, sure, that's fine. So Kevin Briggs sends me this email, tells me that he was out walking his dogs, big dog lover, in Florida, and this huge rainbow came. And Kevin Briggs did not know me, did not even know of me, knew nothing about me at this point. And he said, Dr. Mitchell's voice came out of the rainbow and said, you have to get a message to Rebecca Hardcastle Wright. You need to get a message to her. And the message was that it was time for me to leave Washington, D.C. and move on. And other people were coming in, but I had other things to do. And it would be much healthier for me if I would move out of D.C. and move on with what I was doing. So that's how I became friends with Kevin Briggs.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's funny because when I mentioned to him that you and I have this real connection with Bridgeport, Clarksburg, West Virginia, where we grew up. I think our parents somehow maybe knew each other, and I think maybe even know my mom in some regards. But anyway, when I mentioned to him that I was going to have you on the show, he was like, I'll be curious to see if she mentions what message I had for her, and you just validated.
Of course I would. It was one of the real milestones, and because when you're getting ready to move, you're like, oh, should I? Shouldn't I? You know how that is.
Oh yeah, your pros and cons, right?
Mm-hmm. And his message was just so affirming. I just love Kevin. He's a great friend.
Oh, he's awesome. He's awesome, and he's been. Well, he's been a real integral part in my journey because I not only publish his books, but I also, have become a good friend, and I have him come down for my UFO meetings at Books A Million quite often. And I've been on the show twice. He's awesome. He's a cool guy. Here's what I'm learning. We are part of this UFO community, whatever label you want to call it, but we're part of this little circle. And it's fascinating to me to find out how we are all interconnected and we are all getting these little synchronicities that bound ourselves to each other. And it really becomes another layer of validation that we are on the right path, Rebecca. You are doing, wonderful job with the Institute. I'm doing, media, the show, all this other stuff, UFO Con, and everything has a place in this puzzle. And this puzzle is bringing to light the information that we so sorely lack as humans as to what we really should be doing, what our focus should be, and how we relate to the universe. I mean, that's just been under lock and key forever. And we've been given misinformation. We've been misguided oftentimes. And I just feel like all of us are little warriors in this mission. And we all have our own special gifts and talents and knowledge and experiences. But it's the whole picture. All of us are playing a part in this awakening, if you will, this time that that we're going through. And I mean, I think this whole coronavirus, for me anyway, is even more time to be focusing on what matters and continuing our mission to get this word out to the public. And people like you, Rebecca, are just a blessing because you're out there on the front lines as well. And you've got this institute, which is fantastic. If someone is watching, Rebecca, and they want more information or they would like to give to the organization or become a member or just want to get involved, what should they do? What's some of the steps that they should take to reach out to you?
Just email me. You go on my website and email me on the contact page, or email me on my rhardcastlewright@gmail.com. Really easy. My email is all over the web. So, and actually, my phone number is on WikiLeaks. So.
Oh my goodness. So you are an open book, my friend. That contact information is just all out there.
It's all out there, whatever.
Oh my goodness. I can't believe that story. Wow. What a story that is. So you really, I mean, I didn't know that you had such involvement with the White House and all that. That's fascinating. That really is.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
that was an interesting.
I mean, not too many people can say that, Rebecca.
I've got a lot of good DC stories too.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, so do you know Stephen Bassett then?
I've known Stephen Bassett for years. I mean, I've been in
Yeah,
this for
well,
like
of course, he
20
came to
plus
my
years.
first UFO con, and I had him and Nick Pope. They came over to my house, and we stayed here for several hours after the convention, and just chit chatted around my kitchen table. And it was kind of surreal for me because, it was really my first time of kind of having a mastermind meeting, if you will, behind closed doors in the privacy of my own home, and oh gosh. It was a moment. It was my birthday too. So I'm like, hey, what better birthday present than to sit here and talk to these guys and, really get some information and give me an opportunity to get my ideas and my thoughts and my experiences out to somebody that's not going to judge me or, make fun of me or whatever, but actually can relate to what I'm saying and maybe even give me some further insight into my own experiences. I mean, being in West Virginia, we both have had experiences, and
There's something about
it's
that
not.
state.
Well, we don't talk about it. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure you were the same way I was growing up. We don't talk about that kind of stuff.
But it is a very psychically attuned culture, I think. That whole Scotch Irish. English culture. I mean, England's full of esoterics and people that are proud to be strange. And I mean, it's part of that. So, of course, it's a natural cultural thing. It's just not talked about very much. But you mentioned how to get in touch with our institute. I want to make clear we have two initiatives right now. One initiative is the Exoconscious Entrepreneurs, where we are hoping to bring new inventions and services into the mainstream. And the second one is an IXO Academy, where we'll be teaching, and they blend with each other. So if you're an inventor, you might also want to be a teacher and vice versa. So those are our two main platforms. And we are in the process of right now our official website is exoconsciousness.org, and you can get in touch with me through that. I answer most of those emails also, but my personal website is exoconsciousness.com. So either one of those will work. But I know that people like to be on the ground floor of something and on something exciting. So what we're doing at this point is putting all our effort to those two-pronged programs of the entrepreneurs and the Academy of Teaching. So we also want to be rolling out a new website platform that can be bigger and accommodate that a lot better. So if you want to be on the ground floor, please reach out to me. If you can donate, we would so appreciate any kind of financial participation that you could make, because this is going to be the Institute's going to be an exciting thing for people.
Oh, it sounds like it. And I'm sitting there, my little wheels are turning. I'm like, how can I get involved? Because this sounds so fascinating. And it's
as a communicator. And
it is. It sounds really neat. And you have so many things going on, so many different avenues and services that people could tap into with your institute. What are some events? You guys have some events and stuff coming up later this year, or?
Many of us are going to be in South Dakota at the Consciousness and Contact Conference. It's run by Mia Ferraletto. Some of us are going to be at that. And then
when is that? What's the date?
That's in July. All that's going to be on the newsletter. All of that's on the newsletter if you want to sign up for it. And Sheila Seppi, I believe in September or October, this fall is having a conference in Colorado that many of us will be also attending. So those two, but here's the exciting thing. I'll say it real fast because I know time's running out. But one of the things we envision as we get started, as the website gets built and we begin to have conferences, is that we're not going to really have conferences around speakers. We're going to have conferences around doers. So it's going to be a working conference. So you're going to expect, if you're a healer, you will go to the conference and be taught by other healers.
Oh, nice. So really hands-on experiences.
Right. We're a hands-on group. It's not just about ideas. This is really about applications and implementing ideas.
Oh, wow. Well, that sounds fantastic. Wow. I'm excited. I can't wait. Like I said, I want to be part of your newsletter group, and definitely want to get some more information about how I can get involved, because it sounds fascinating. Your book, you said you're in closing. We got about a minute and a half left. Your book, when do we expect your new book to come out?
I think probably, so this is spring, probably late summer, early fall. It's going to be called The Exoconscious Human. I also have Exoconsciousness, Your 21st Century Mind, and Exoconscious Humans Guiding Our Space-Faring Future. I wrote a book about how exoconscious humans should be involved in space travel and in space research.
Wonderful. Well, I tell you what, when your new book gets ready to come out, I'm going to have you back on, and hopefully I'll get a copy of it and be able to read through it and be able to talk about that book on the next time that you visit with us here on the show. But my goodness, that sounds great. And I am so happy to finally get you on the show, Rebecca, and kind of sort of meet you face to face in this
the same neck of the woods
time. So you're doing some really great things, and all of us here in the community appreciate all your hard work, and I know that a lot of blood, sweat, and tears goes in what you do for a living, and I really do appreciate that, and hopefully we can get you back on the show, talk about your book, find out some more information about what you're doing at the Institute. But until then, I encourage all of our audience to go to their website, sign up for that newsletter, and get involved with this organization, because it's a good one. Until next week, I'm your host, Melissa Kennedy, and I want you to keep looking up. Thank you.